Rodney Mullen inventing the flatland ollie would change everything.
And it was interesting because even though he did that trick, very few people did it for a long time.
When that happened, we didn't think, oh yeah, that's going to be a trick that's going to set the precedent of skateboarding for generations to come.
I mean, it really started changing the landscape of skateboarding, going away from being all based on vert, really, to really taking it into the streets and putting it in the hands of every kid.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Right on. Oh, thank you so much for coming here. This is insane. All right. I know that was indulgent for those of you who don't know, right? It's just an example how a simple innovation in one corner of skating brought change to the rest. There are tons of others. Basic movements from that trick came from another I've been doing for years. And one day I saw him in a new way, inspired by another skater. Went home a couple hours later, there it was. Even then, nobody even cared until skating evolved for always to become useful. And that's a story for a lot of innovations, where old ideas can take on new forms in different contexts that bring on change. Whatever the case, I've been given a lot too much credit for making up a few tricks that turned out to be foundational to the modern era. I've also studied chemical engineering until a friend borrowed money from a loan shark, which took me on a winding path that landed me and my board in the Smithsonian, and now here before you, now the greatest honor of my life. Thank you for coming here. Yeah. So let's pick up where we left off and hope to shine a little light on the way science and skating can combine in beautifully unruly ways. And hopefully there's some slides, there we go. By the early mid-'80s, injuries started to pile up and insurance costs went up and put a lot of skate parks out of business, at least where I lived, all over the US, pushed skaters out into the streets. Suddenly, ollies became useful, helped us snap up onto stuff. Stairs, handrails, ledges, all of it opened up the dimensionality that defines us. The endless ways we can combine trick with different terrains has kept us busy for decades. We think it's art. Authorities sometimes think differently, which is baked into our heritage. Skating began as kind of a beach surrogate for surfers who naturally imposed their, what they thought was cool, the way skating should be, which trickled on into judging and who was winning contests, best teams, magazine coverage, and it moved the culture a lot. Meanwhile, a bunch of us were starting to come in, new generations that barely went to the beach, didn't relate to any of that stuff. We just wanted to push the limits of what could be done with a board and four wheels. That sensitized me and a lot of peers at that time to the power of culture to either propel or restrict progress. I think it's not a coincidence we connected so easily with the rebellion of the punk rock culture, which has always been part of our essence. I can't help but note this, the work of Glenn E. Friedman, who not only shot the best skaters at the time, but the most iconic album covers, both in punk rock and hip hop. He was the first one to really clock the connection, the mutual respect that these seemingly different people had for each other. This broadened us, at the same time made us more connected than ever. There's books written about this, but a really cool documentary called All the Streets Are Silent, and it's legit. So as all this was emerging, a whole new culture and economy was springing up around it that spawned a revolution in skater-owned companies that persist to this day. All these clusters of talented kids from all over the world. I remember going to South Bank for the first time. Everyone contributing all of their tricks, vibes, their terrains to this common pool of tricks that fed us all, which made the scene explode. Look at them, the new CEOs. And then this guy, Maniac, was Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year. These are some of my friends. All of us tend to be kind of outsiders, that we seek a sense of belonging, but only on our own terms. As I said, the whole community shares these common groups of tricks, but each of us tries to distinguish ourselves in the individual way we do them. We're very much of an open source community in the sense that the greater contribution we make through the tricks that we create, the more we embed what we do into the language, the ways other people project themselves, and that weaves us into the fabric as a whole. Funny, after the Olympics, all these people coming out of the woodwork like, oh, you skateboarders are so cool. What separates you most is the way you root for each other, which is baked into the ethos of how we learn and earn respect. We're all competitive in our own way, that's what drives us, but ultimately the way we make a name is far from a zero-sum game, right? Together we rise. Okay, so this is a visualization, a model for the way creativity and imagination work with each other. And I borrow heavily from John Seeley Brown, senior scientist at Xerox PARC, who is a fan of skateboarding. We presented together at MIT and Stanford. He is a wizard. So there's this scholarly definition of creativity, which is to make the familiar strange. Conversely, the imagination seeks to make the strange familiar. So what that means is for whatever creative act in a given domain, the imagination seeks to stretch it into some outer, unrecognizable one, feeding creativity to adapt anew. Sound familiar, right? The ollie and so many other tricks. This is the essence of what skaters do. Skaters hack the world around them by using it in ways never intended, usually not authorized, create something new in the process which we share amongst ourselves. It's what drives the community. So this same push-pull engine was not only shaping the tricks, but also the products at the time. If you remember that little company I mentioned with the loan shark, it eventually grew into the biggest company of that era. And as someone who was designing the boards, the trucks, the wheels, even some shoes, and rippled into fashion even, probably the greatest asset I had was understanding some of the engineering and science behind it, but also a nuanced feel for what those numbers meant for whatever skateboarding was doing at that time. The flip side is also true, where all these ideas were springing up of, oh, wow, we could make your board last longer or the trick easier with whatever add-on, which is ultimately stripped down and collectively shed, because it always boils down to, yeah, but do you really need that? So for an invention to become an innovation, it has to match the ethos and the usage of the culture adopting it. Big lesson for us. So that trick's called a half cab impossible late front foot flip. If for as clunky as the name sounds, you can tell it's a combination of smaller, more granular movements you might consider executive motor functions. And the way those are made are like the way you might draw out a flip book, where endless hours go through the details of every single page until eventually, with a flick of a thumb or a foot, out comes this fluid motion in an automatic way. Well, every skater does some form of this, whether we can articulate it or not. And the way I learned to sort of parse and splice these matching movements together gave me kind of a leg up in the type of skating at the time that was freestyle, just flat ground stuff, and eventually translated into street skating in my own way. So if you Google the godfather of street skating, I pop up really because of that more than anything else. And the point of this is that these analytic processes are what informs, infuses, and conjoins with the athleticism, the spirit of what we do. That's what distinguishes us. There's an art to science and a science to art, huh? So if I were to list some of the tricks you saw, it looks something like this, or mostly that way. You see the way we combine movements and sub-movements imposes a kind of grammar or syntax based on the mechanics of what's going on. Nomenclature of chemistry evolved for similar reasons, hence there's a resemblance. Today, two skaters can be texting the names of tricks back and forth, and regardless of their native tongue, regardless if the trick has ever even been done, both sides will completely understand every nuance of movement. Now, to give you a little sense of appreciation for how hard it is to communicate movement, check out labor notation, which was developed in the 1920s and adopted as the official notation for dancers by 1940. Clearly a lot went into it. Look at how detailed it is. Yet interestingly, it's the creative freedom, the freedom of the movement of the ballet, the artists themselves, that adds to its complexity because of the lack of specific constraint. They don't even have to factor in terrain like maybe rock climbers do, where every crack and crevice determines not only the path, but the grips and the movements they use. So they have this robust and detailed set of diagrams, which works for them to share and communicate terrain and technique. But still, it's the same freedom of movement that makes it somewhat cumbersome. Now, I'm almost done. I'm going somewhere for a reason that, compared to us, I hope you don't mind if I rattle off a few trick names so you get a sense of its compactness and conciseness. Handstand, finger flip, nose wheelie, half cab heel flip, dark side transfer, nollie inward out, kick flip, under flip, switch crook, switch heel, flip, shove, crook right nollie, half cab heel to fakie, kick flip, forward, prima to prima, transfer, nose wheelie, nollie, half cab heel, dark side to fakie, switch flip, switch one foot, nose wheelie, right? Yeah. So a couple of things to notice. Each and every move was distinct and different, yet you heard certain names again and again, right? Because we have this sort of prefix, root, suffix structure that delineates whether you're going with your native stance, whether you're going backwards or forwards, which direction your board is turning from a couple of different planes, and even more. It even denotates some of the terrain you might be skating. Now, a CTO at IBM was so taken by the denotative clarity of all of this, he's like, let's do a little project together. Since AI is fed by data, which is most readily digestible from machine learning in this form of structured text, then maybe we could feed it to Watson. We could teach it to talk like a skater and maybe even think like a skater. So we gave it ideas, right? Kickflip, nose wheelie. And the crazy thing was, it started to rattle off like a page of variations that made sense, even though we didn't teach it to physics. It's embedded in the language. So we took it another step further. As a chatbot, we started to integrate terrain. As you know, right? Like, think of London, think of Barcelona, which is a giant skate park. There's over 100 entries on the web, just specifically on one page, that not only tells you where all the spots are, what they look like, but what hour security is working and more. So we fed it to this chatbot, and the next thing you know, you could submit an idea, right? Again, like half cab crooks, and suddenly it would rattle off these variations, take you to spots around the city, including bus lines, and even gave you a learning path to take it even further, like from ledges to hubbas to small handrails. My point in all this prattling is that together we created this unruly group of kids from across the world with no central authority, which testifies to the strength of our diversity, but more importantly, the power of an ethos built on we lift each other up, mutual advancement, and ultimately rooted in the physics of what we do with those constraints. So it is my honor to be here today, that the next time you're walking around, the scientists, whomever, right, general civilian, walking around looking at the rippling influence of what we've created, maybe one of us whizzes past you, slightly pisses you off, at least you can summon a smile or a chuckle, right, at how much we have in common, how much we share. So that's Shaun White. Imagine doing that crazy disorienting trick, landing whenever you're going 15, 20 miles an hour, and seeing the cameraman right there hopping off just enough to scare him to death and laugh about it, right? In order to have that presence of mind, you have had to do these tricks hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, which actually embeds the physics of the environment into the movements themselves. It's very much like an accent. You don't normally know it until you're out of your native domain, right? Vert skaters are a great example because they learn in this weightless environment where a super light touch and super slow timing as you guide it in, that's what they learn. It gets embedded. So by the time they transpose it, bring it down to the ground, kick flip, 360 flip, whatever, the tricks we have in common, it looks so soggy, so basically terrible, that Tony Hawk gives it a disease-sounding name called vertosis. Now, Shaun White is an insane example because snowboarding, gold medalist, right? And vert skating, very similar, only the bigger distances, the longer times, the fact that it's fastened to his feet gives him access to rotations that don't come nearly as naturally to us. This shapes not only his skating, which is only obvious how fast he learns, but also his creative ideation. Well, if the physics of the environment gets baked into the movement so deeply that you can't get them out, and it even shapes your creative thinking, your imagination, then what else gets in there, right? Imagine a kid learning to play a piano. He is mapping sound to movement according to rules of harmony in the architecture of both the piano and his own movements. And yet he infuses the music itself with pieces of himself. Think about Ray Charles' version of Yesterday or Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah, Is There a Rival, right? Likewise with skaters. When we're learning a trick, we're mapping the movement according to rules and architectures, but we're also infusing elements of ourselves, where we're coming from, our past, that reshape the tricks themselves. Make no mistake, guys like Danny and Sean and Nigel and all these amazing people, by their dedication and gifts and broken bones, all of it, they will lead the way in general. But the legions of skaters around the world over time contribute to this pool of tricks that fuels our progression all the more. This is the power of the open source language that we have. So Danny is insane. He has what Sean has, right? Not only is he a pro skater, pro snowboarder, but also moto, right? So all that Evel Knievel stuff, these ramps, yeah, it shaped his creative ideation to imagine that monstrosity called the mega ramp. So he had this idea. He built it out in the desert, did it for a year or so, hit us all with a video, if you remember that Metallica soundtrack. It shocked us all. It stretched what we do to alien proportions, truly. So after doing that these months, even longer, it took a while. If you've seen Waiting for Lightning, the documentary on this, somebody had the great idea to jump the Great Wall of China, which stretched even what he knew to alien proportions. So he's like, if you know Danny, he's like, yeah, sounds great to me. So he flies into China. They have this, again, monstrosity. I think the takeoff ramp was like 5 or 6 stories. And imagine, it's like 8 or 9 feet wide at the top. Danny looks at this thing, right? It's like, I think showtime was the next day. All these camera, the press is there, like dignitaries. And he looks at it, goes to the top, he's looking down, he's a friend. He's like, I'm not gonna make it. This thing's not tall enough. It's not big enough. Well, he takes it up with the engineers who created this thing, right, over the last couple of months. They didn't take kindly. They let him know his place. Oh, what are your credentials? And so he's like, all right. He drops in. As soon as he started picking up speed, feeling the acceleration, he's like, I am not going to make it. He throws his feet out, the last thing you want to do, going 50 miles an hour, right, with an incoming ramp lip, and fractures his ankle, spinning down to the bottom, writhing in pain. I told you, right? So at this stage, he has a fractured ankle. He goes, how much do you need? It was a kicker ramp. It's like a pimple on top of a mountain. It was so small, this extra ramp, that extra speed that he needed. They square that away. Next day, gets rest. By then, all the swelling, the stiffness sets in. They shoot him up with the equivalent of Novocaine. He said he couldn't feel anything below his ankles, like a block of ice. Couldn't feel his board. Danny being Danny, he goes up, does it anyway, drops in, makes it clean, right? And because he's Danny, still not happy, goes to the top, backside 360s it, right? That's why he's a legend, right? The big question here is, How did he know? I'm not sure if Danny made it out of high school, and I'm really sure he's never cracked an engineering book. And yet he knew with that kind of accuracy. He was able through again, the ramp was way bigger than he'd ever experienced. Yet all those years, all those thousands of hours of feeling the subtle frictions that accumulate in the bearings, the stretch of the hot wheels, maybe the flex at the bottom plies of this giant ramp, all of it, whatever it was, he felt those subtle frictions. He had an awareness of what they were, right? And he was able to put it into words, into measurement. Now, presently, even as books, papers, as recently from the Royal Societies last month, they are studying embodied cognition as we attempt to make more robust AI models. What I can tell you, at least from this perspective, every skater at that level, it is my, again, honor to have so many in my life over all the years. And I can tell you, yes, they have all the athleticism. Yes, they have all of these facets, a little bit crazy, dedication. But what separates them is they have an inner calculus of movement, an embodied sense for all the forces at play that feels that sort of calculus. That's what enables and makes their sort of mental model so robust to make them learn so fast and to keep them in one piece. So this is Tony doing a front foot impossible, trying to put that together with backside air. And the momentums are fighting each other, right? Conservation of angular momentum in the air. He opens up on the front foot impossible on the first try, and it halts his angular velocity just so much that he can't squeeze in this last few degrees of reentry. So again, Tony is so clear, like he learns so fast, he's able to think, okay, what do I do to fix it? What's the problem? And you can see him already leaning in with his shoulder. He's pulling his body in, gets to the top, opens up slightly less, staying out of the way of his board, and enables him to get it in. For every new trick you're trying, if it's never been done before, you always try to project to some midpoint, and then you start back propagating of whatever it takes to land it. Now again, Tony, what makes him so amazing is not even watching the stuff that he makes, it's watching him learn. It's seriously 2, 3, 4 times faster than I've ever seen anyone. Burnquist has this in a crazy way. When he lands, you can see him reliving everything he does as he's tucking like his body. It's like he went 5 iterations right there with these mental models. My point, again, it is athleticism, it's all of these things, but it's also the way that the kind of scientific process, this analytic process, infuses the movement itself. That's what sets these guys apart. Now, having spent so much time around people like this, I've become hardened in the conviction that the greatest obstacle to creativity is breaking through the barrier of disbelief. 4-minute miles often cited, which happens with us all the time, where all the best skaters in the world are aiming after one particular trick. 900 is a great example. One finally lands it, puts it out on video, whatever, YouTube, and suddenly the rest come like lemming. Random people all over. The insult to injury, again, is people who've spent their lives doing this, is that people, they don't even seem to have that much skill necessarily. The movements aren't as clean, but they can do it. Because at these levels, it's very often the case that it's not talent or technique that's setting people apart. But in order to do what's never been done, you have to have this concomitant belief that you can precipitate, do something no one has ever done. That in itself is the rarest of qualities, and to have them at these levels of talent puts you in a group with Danny Way, Tony Hawk, and all the rest.
If something's been done, it's so much easier to learn than if it's never been done before. If someone else has made it, then you just, in your head, it's possible, you can do it. It's all convincing yourself. Every trick that I'd never done before was a matter of telling myself, you are capable of doing this, this is possible, go do it.
Tony and Rodney were both outsiders from the beginning. And for a long time, what they were doing was considered odd. They would do it, you would bring your friends to come to the park, see what Tony's doing. hey, we're going to come out behind the building. I'll show you what Rodney's doing. And they would go look at that and they go, oh, it's like a freak show.
Yet another reason Tony's the greatest skater, man. As kids, we were put on kind of an elite team called the Bones Brigade. All of us were chosen because, yeah, we had certain skills, but more importantly, we had a certain mindset that once banded together, a whole new sense of normal took hold that was anything but that. It pushed back the horizons of what was possible, and much more importantly, at least for me, it cracked open realms that people considered impossible. At that time, kick flips, heel flips, variations, right? The quick flip of a board was usual. People did it everywhere. But people considered impossible as going over head over heel style because it would take so long. It's like, oh, it's so impossible, whatever. Just because people label that, it focused your attention, and the next thing you know, you can do it, right? The beauty of it, again, you put it out into the world, and in no time, the community, people start coming in with harder variations. My point is that this kind of shared belief generates a synergy amongst us that took us further than we would have ever made it as individuals. What a blessing to be part of that team. So have you ever seen this white vase-looking thing, right? People like me, took me a half an hour to see the faces staring at each other in the black. In the negative space. Likewise, whenever you're doing or trying what's never been done, there's nobody there to show you. You don't even know if it can be done. So what you do is you navigate the negative space of it, right? You start doing everything I've been sharing, like Tony was doing, and you let the feelings, it pulls you into place until it becomes visible. Think of Michelangelo chipping away at everything that wasn't David until he appeared, right? Again and again, it is the way that, well, it's an embodied sense of the scientific method. This is what we do, right? What separates good skaters from great is not just the athleticism. There's so many people that can do whatever they see with textbook perfection. I don't necessarily have those skills, but goodness, I recognize those who do. But what separates us in the long term is, but how can we infuse this analytic side, again, the essence of the scientific method, into what we do? Art to science, science to art. For fear of beating a horse perilously close to dead. Last note on this, right? So these are all variations of a kickflip, underflip. You can tell by the rhythmic nature of it. It's the same kernel. Over hundreds and hundreds of tries, you develop all these mental tags of tugging these pieces into place like you said Tony do. During that time, you are bound to go down rabbit trails at least a half dozen times, at least. And that may cost hours, it may cost days. So your ability to backtrack and correct for those bad decisions at those forks is the only thing that determines if you ride away. That is the only thing. You can be 99% there, never do that last bit, and it's as though you never tried. So again, it is this infusion of the analytic process that separates us. I can't help but share this, not my specialty, but then again, in case it's not clear, pro skating, it's about constantly learning, adapting. You get this, but then you just take it to the next level. This is what drives us. So you're naturally drawn to teaching computers how to learn. How do they do it? Are there parallels? This paper reads as much, in the bottom right-hand corner, reads as much as neuroscience does computer science. And the title itself is compelling. The science of forgetting may be what unlocks AGI. Now, this is from years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago. It's what DeepMind was doing, but it is legit. Very simple graph. See on the yellow, that's with no tinkering, basically. And all they're doing in the blue and the teal is simply cleverly teaching it to overwrite with less critical data, to teaching it to forget. Now, I say this because it's a cool parallel, but more importantly, we've all heard about this 10,000-hour rule, where 10,000 hours goes into anything and you develop expertise. Sure, of course. But for the nature of the complex nature of what we do, and I talk about the backtracking, right? It is so difficult to unlearn certain movements. Ever try to swing, right? Like baseball, golf, whatever it is. It is so difficult to unlearn movements because of the compound nature. They stick to each other. They stick to each other. And so my point in saying this is, it's not practice make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect, or as close as you can get.
The kickflip was working, and I was trying, and I was running out of it, but I was too scared on my mind to commit, because the one that I break my leg, it was like pretty gnarly, and I was freaking out. But if there was a time to try to go for it, it was that one. Yep. So much love in skateboarding, It's a big family. It's that. It's for real that. So it's good to keep it that way. We should keep it that way.
Oh, that is the community, right? How do you practice stuff that can get you killed? It's often said the best skaters are the best fallers, and this is pretty good evidence, right? Through a paradigm of managing failure on a sustainable basis, you develop a kind of predictive acumen. It's not that Milton's timing is so great. Sorry, it's not that Milton sees it all happening. It's just a pattern recognition. And you see that. He kicks away all but the perfect one. The coolest part about it is the footage. You saw the skaters, legit skaters hanging around the cameraman, and you can hear one of the other skaters go, yep, as soon as he flicks the board. Because he had that same ingrained pattern recognition, this somatic awareness over thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. This is part of the unspoken, the tacit that connects us so much as skaters. Now, this somatic intuition, call it, is so finely tuned that it's the first to fall out of tune when practice begins to wane. We all get hurt, right? Tweak an ankle. You're out for a week, 2, 3, whatever. You break at 8. You get on your board again, you flick it, a little shy at first, and you're like, oh, motor function still in place. It feels normal. Next thing you know, you start getting hurt again because you lose that fine-tuned awareness of where you and your board will be at the moment of commitment. That can lead to a cycle of injury and more downtime and re-injury and more downtime. This retired more pro skaters than I can begin to count. So the deliberate maintenance of these very subtle skill sets are what are instrumental to setting people apart to do what we do at these levels. Now, I think all of us would, at least in some touchy-feely way, acknowledge there is such a thing as an intuition. And yet we have Fields Medal winners to chess grandmasters who testify to its efficacy in the most rigorous of all logical pursuits, right? Magnus Carlsen is quite famous about this, his intuition, great documentary on it. And weirdly, it does see whatever we know about that level of chess, that the less he thinks about, the more fluid and easily he wins. Arguably, the greatest chess grandmaster of all time, Kasparov, says this about him, that he has an ability to sense the potential of a move so far away that no human, not even a computer, can calculate it. I cannot begin to fathom what that means to them, but I understand what it means, the fact that he said it. There is something to it. I say this because intuition, this development of it, whatever parallel process, embodied cognition, whatever it is real, and it's what we need to develop to stay in one piece, doing what we do. Every trick you've seen here, with very rare exception, takes hours, if not days, if not longer to land. The vast majority of what we do is fall and get back up again, which shapes us proportionally as individuals and as a community. Now, as mentioned, most companies are owned or operated, at least at crucial junctures, by people who have lived the life they know. So by the time you're signing the dotted line of whatever contract that binds you to that company for your future, they know sometimes they have to keep paying you for months on end for hobbling around on crutches, just hoping you've seen a doctor. And even if you're thinking about rehab, and you know you have to go right back to what took you out. And then one day you might not come back from that, right? It is this mutual understanding of what it takes to do what we need to do, to keep pushing further, that makes this community so rich. It is the unspoken understanding that we have. God, what a good community. So this may come as a surprise, right on, yeah? This may come as a surprise to you, but skating can be hard on your body. Right? Yeah. In my case, I couldn't deny it anymore when they started offering me wheelchairs when I got off long flights. It's terrible. This is, remember the Glenn's Friedman slide with the rappers, right? I talk about the mutual respect of different circles that we don't know. That's what happened to me. People, I don't even know, legends surfing, right? His wife, Gabby Reese, Laird Hamilton, they're calling me, yelling at me. I don't know these people. Saying, see this surgeon, you've got to do this. So I go. The surgeon with a mask on, these eyes, shiny eyes. He's looking at my x-rays with this kind of quizzical look. It's like, you athletes, do you realize you've lost a 1/4 inch of a bone on your right side and 5/16 to 3/8 on your left side? Like, how's your back? Like, I can give you new wheels. Sign me up both at once. Next thing I know, you wake up in the hospital if you've been through this, man. My night nurse, not a sense of humor. So he's taking me, waking me up with my walker. First time I put my feet to the ground and I'm looking at my left foot and it is seriously 45, 50 degrees. It's a club foot. And we're both taking it in moderate horror, going, what's going on with your foot? I'm like, I have no idea. I cruise around. Victorious, I get back to my bed. And you know this thing, right? They give you these little booties, right? The whole toe to heel thing, kicking them off. And I'm fully airballing it, right? On the right side. I'm looked down like, my left foot, my brain thinks my left foot is not 2 or 3 inches. It's like 9 inches from where it's supposed to be. I'm thinking, wow, I'm so grateful for all this, but everything I've done on a skateboard, out the window, right? 3 months later, I go riding, first time, which is crazy fast. I can't help but share this. I'm going to use it in a second. Networking, right? Brain tells the body how to move, do all this stuff, right? Think of computer networking. I don't know if you know TCP/IP model or OSI model. Application layer. However we write these programs rest on the infrastructure of the internet itself, the hardware side. In a similar way, you remember the way I described an accent? You don't recognize you have one, me here, until you're out of your native domain. Likewise, how are you ever going to know that your infrastructure has changed out from under you unless you've had a crazy surgery like this? My first time skating, my feet were so bad, I had to get like an extra big, like a vert board, like something Danny would ride, kick around because I kept trying to put my feet back on the board and I'd miss. I'm thinking my life has been these libraries, again, computer analogies, but I have got libraries, decades of all this kinesthetic code of whatever synaptic idiom the brain tells the body what to do. And yet the infrastructure stuff, the compiling, it's all broken. And so I started reworking this stuff, started learning, and that in itself, enough to fill a book. I won't belabor you now, but this idea that we get crosstalk between the layers. Esteemed psychologist Thelma Lobel, right, Harvard, Tel Aviv, she writes these fascinating books on how senses can sneak into our cognitive thinking and sort of hack them. It's awesome stuff, especially if you want to hack people. It's basically, it boils down to these middle layers talking to each other. We don't know it. Likewise, that was happening to me, especially with fear recognition, all that stuff. My point is, what is my point? Thank you. Thank you. Lance Mountain legend, right? So I hadn't done that trick in 10 years. I hadn't even thrown it, really. But Lance so blows me away. It's so humbling. He wanted to go shoot something for a little project we're doing. I'm like, yeah, man, let's go. 4 tries. Before I even turned on the camera, I made it. 5 tries later, a clean one. What a gift this is to have spent our lives doing one thing that connects us in so many ways. That is the point, I suppose. So whether you're building a better light bulb or landing a rocket, failure can take many forms. As you've seen with us, sometimes it can take months to heal up before we get a chance at whatever took us out. One dude, he broke his toe in a bad way, needed surgery. He was haunted by this deadline, which, as you know, deadlines, they're never the truth. He goes to the doc, he's like, please just cut my toe off. I got to get back to it. That's when the doc said, hey, do you realize you're going to have to learn to walk again if I do that? My point bringing it out here is anyone who's pushed themselves at these levels where all of what they do, it defines who you are, right? And if you're caring, if it means that much to you, this kind of madness pervades, certainly among my peers. Me, that's for sure. And the only thing that can stabilize you of people who have lived that life, this is the importance, again, of community to keep us going, to keep us sane as we push the limits further. By some clerical error, I ended up as a fellow at MIT Media Lab. They brought me in there because I have some years. I have a little bit of analytic capacity, a little bit of creative background. I've done a few things in the world. So what they wanted me there to do is help these brilliant students, and I mean other level, to help guide them of like, hey, do you realize this could be used that way or this way to help guide them in what they do, maybe to get their ideas out into the world, help them. I will tell you that for all of this, again, the engineering background, of course that helps, that matters. You're paying those dues. But what connected, what made this so meaningful is I couldn't believe how much that skateboarding itself, everything I'm sharing now, that is what gave me success there and made this experience so meaningful, right? We share this. So by now you've seen what skateboarding has done for me and those of us who stayed in skateboarding. There are other skateboarders who have taken it to much bigger realms, from winning multiple Oscars, right? Grammys, running some of our finest academic institutions, engineering, Jet Propulsion Lab, main dude is a skater. Where I'm going with this is while the working knowledge for success in whatever endeavor is always available, it's these subtleties along the way, these intangibles of how we learn to learn and handle failure that form the basis of the resilience we need to work within those frameworks. Most of all, what ultimately guides and propels you is just a love for what you're doing in the first place, an abiding respect that binds us as a community. It's worked for me, some of my friends. I hope something here can translate to what you do. Thank you so much for having me. Truly, thank you.